Thank you, Lizzie. Okay, so as Lizzie already said, I was in 6th grade when I wrote my first novel. It was called Once a Filly, Never Again. And it was the story of a young girl and her horse, because of course, what 12-year-old girl doesn't want her own pony? And it was a really sad story. Spoiler alert, in case you're thinking of asking me to borrow it, the horse dies at the end. Once a Filly, Never Again was not only my first novel, it was my last novel, because I learned something really important about myself when I was writing it. And that was, while I really loved writing stories, I wasn't so good at making them up. Fiction writing just wasn't my bag. So I made my first career pivot at the tender age of 13, and I turned my attention away from my dream of being a fiction writer and started focusing on journalism. And journalism is what I studied in high school and in college, and then my first professional job in my mid-20s was in journalism as well. And there was so much that I loved about being a journalist. Most importantly, I loved the writing and the storytelling, of course. It was a really glamorous job, and I liked it a lot, but there was one thing about it that I really didn't like, and that was asking the hard questions. I was really uncomfortable, I discovered, making other people uncomfortable. And let's be honest, that's like probably the most important part of being a journalist, right? Is shining a light on dark corners and on places and things that people are trying to keep hidden. So after a couple of years in journalism, I started thinking about another career pivot. And that is what led me to the world of tech marketing. I had a brief stopover in media relations and public relations, which was a great transition from journalism into business. So I started out at a company called Digital Think, was there for a few years before moving over to an up-and-coming 300-person company that was pre-IPO at the time called Salesforce.com. So I was the first marketing writer at Salesforce.com. And I was there for about 10 years. It was a really, really interesting time. You can ask me about that afterwards if you want. So in my last couple of years, I was there for 10 years, like I said, over 10 years. And then in the last couple of years at Salesforce, content marketing was just starting to become a thing. So this was the time when blogging was kind of ending its time as this thing that teenagers did on MySpace, and businesses were starting to experiment with blogging. They were using it as a direct channel to communicate with their audiences, kind of like a daily newspaper for their company. Social media, which had been around for a long time, was starting to be leveraged by businesses in really effective ways for the first time around that time. And all of that made this the perfect time for something like content marketing to come along. And the more I started learning about this emerging discipline of content marketing, the more I really liked it, the more intrigued I got. Salesforce wasn't doing content marketing at this time. And I started reading about what other companies were doing, and it started to feel like it was the perfect match for my two backgrounds. It's kind of like journalism and marketing had a love child. That's content marketing. And a quick aside, how many of you were in here for Bill Messidas' talk before this on unicorns? Okay, great. So Bill is the person who brought me over to Zendesk. He was my first boss. He hired me at Zendesk. He and I had worked together at Salesforce. And as I was starting to learn about content marketing, he was looking for someone to come over to Zendesk and lead a new content marketing team for them. And so even though I had not really practiced content marketing, of course he was familiar with my background in content and marketing or in journalism and marketing, and agreed that that was the perfect combination of what he was looking for in a leader at Zendesk. So I was fortunate enough to get the offer and come over and join Zendesk a little over 5 years ago. So I've been practicing content marketing ever since. And so that's what I'm here to talk to you about today, content marketing. And moment of truth, I spend a lot more time writing and editing and working with writers than I do talking at conferences. But I do love content and I love writing, so I'm really excited to be here today to have this opportunity to talk to you guys about it. So thank you. And I am not the only marketer who is passionate about content. Content has risen in the last 5 years that it has started becoming more and more of a thing, from kind of behind the scenes of great marketing programs to what I consider to be its rightful place. It is front and center. It is the cornerstone of many of the best known and loved brands in the world today. Oops. Brands like Adobe, brands like Marriott, Cleveland Clinic, Coca-Cola, these very well-known and loved brands have made significant multi-million-dollar investments in content. And they're getting all kinds of awards and accolades for the amazing content that they're producing. They're also seeing a business benefit from this content because they're continuing to increase their investment in their output of content. So the downside to all this love and attention that gets paid to content is that suddenly, over the last few years, everyone has joined the cult of content. Every meeting I go to, everyone's talking about content, content, content. Let's produce content. Let's do content without any kind of idea of what that really means. Every marketing conference you go to, there's dozens of talks about content. Every marketing website or publication creates content about content, which is really meta. And it's gotten to the point where a couple of years ago, I could hardly stand the sound of the word content. It was really grating on me, just very annoying. It almost became a meaningless buzzword, not just for me, but I think for a lot of people in marketing, very overused. Fortunately, though, it seems like lately the cult of content is starting to die down. And now we're moving on to the latest marketing darling, which seems to be ABM. Account-based marketing is the thing you can't go anywhere without hearing all about. And honestly, I'm totally fine with this shift in focus. I'm happy with the spotlight moving away from us because I hope what that means is we will stop seeing so many random acts of content. So as I mentioned, in meetings, people are like, let's do some content. And next thing you know, everyone's spending tens of thousands of dollars and lots of time on a video with no thought for the message or the audience or the goal, what you're trying to accomplish with this content. It's just let's do content for content's sake. And that's not a good reason to do content. So we're starting to move beyond this shiny object phase of content marketing into a phase that's more considered and ultimately a lot more effective of strategic content marketing. Okay, so that's what we're going to talk about today. So I want to start there. I want to start by defining content marketing. And I want to tell you a funny little story about when I was interviewing with Bill at Zendesk for the director of content marketing position. And we were waiting for a conference room. I was talking to the head of the video team who made that video that he just showed, if you guys were in here, with the old couple. I was chatting with Matt, was his name, and he turns to me and says, Monica, what is content marketing? And I froze. So I kind of bumbled my way through an answer, a really long, convoluted answer about what I thought it was and this emerging discipline and blah, blah, blah. And my internal dialogue is going, Monica, get it together. How could you not have a ready answer for what is content marketing when you're applying for the director of content marketing at a company? So when I talked to Matthew later after I miraculously got the job, he said he wasn't trying to put me on the spot or anything. He honestly just didn't know what content marketing was, and he'd been hearing about it and wanted the definition. So, but I can assure you I never made that mistake again. I immediately after that made sure that I had a very succinct and easy to remember answer for what is content marketing. So I'm going to make sure none of you ever make that mistake. I'm going to share that with you right now. So content marketing at its core is communicating with your audience without selling. And I want to let that sink in for a second, especially the last bit there. Communicating with your audience without selling. Because that first part of the definition, that's kind of marketing in general, right? I mean, that's what marketing is. Marketing is about communicating with your audience of customers or prospective customers, your buyers. That is marketing. But it's the without selling part that sets content marketing apart from other parts of the marketing mix, like demand gen. Okay. So to dig into that a little bit, I want to talk about content marketing in comparison to another really important part of the marketing mix, which is product marketing. Is anyone in here a product marketer? Oh, good. Okay, great. So I would say this even if you guys weren't in the room, I promise, but I love product marketers. So my content marketing team, and I also run events and social media at Zendesk, we work really closely with product marketing, and that's because they know everything. So product marketing knows all about the product. They know all the features. They know the strengths and the weaknesses. They know what's on the roadmap. They know the use cases. They know how customers are using it. They know all about the customers and their jobs and their day-to-day. They know the industry, the competition. They know everything. So they are our BFFs. We work together with them really closely. I find that like at Salesforce and at Zendesk, product marketing was, I always say, they're the glue that holds the rest of the GTM organization together. Okay, it's a really important role. And we work closely with them despite the fact that at their core, content marketing and product marketing are completely different disciplines. Okay? You'll see though that they're kind of two sides of the same coin, so we're going to talk about that in a little bit as well. Okay. And I want to be clear, you do need both. You need product marketing and you need content marketing, but don't confuse them because they're very different. So let's look at how. So product marketing is focused on your product, right? Duh. It's focused on your message. It's focused on your point of view. Content marketing, on the other hand, is focused on your audience. It's focused on their interests and their point of view. Okay, now good PMs right now might be thinking, well, I care about the audience too. And you just said that I'm really smart and I know a lot about the audience. And that's definitely true. But it's about your starting point. Product marketers, when they're preparing content or they're writing, they tend to take the viewpoint of the product and the company and the message that they want to communicate. And same with content marketers. They also care about the product and the message. But their starting point for creating things is the audience and what they want. So another way to think about it is the difference between product marketing and content marketing is the difference between what you want to tell your audience and what they want to hear. So to explore that a little bit more, we're all grown-ups, right? We're in control of our own time. We get to decide what we spend time listening to, watching, reading, et cetera, for the most part. I mean, sometimes we have work obligations, obviously, but we get to decide what we read, what we watch, what content we consume. And if you're like me, you probably feel like you don't have enough time to read or watch or listen to all of the things that you want to, right? So knowing that, how much time do you have for the things that the brands in your life and the brands that aren't in your life, but that want to be in your life, how much time do you have for the content that they want you to watch and listen to? None, right? We don't have any. So unless you also happen to be interested in this content that the brand wants you to consume, you're always going to pass it by for something that you're interested in, right? I think a lot of times marketers forget when they're in the midst of creating something they're really excited about that no one is forced to consume their content. Maybe their boss or the person who's approving it, but no one in their target audience is obligated to read it. Okay? It is your job to make them want to. And you have a lot of competition, other kinds of content to get their attention. And this is what content marketing is all about. This is what the problem that content marketing is helping solve. It's about creating things that people actually want to watch or read or listen to. Again, not because you want them to, but because they want to. It's something that's useful to them. It's bringing them value. It's helping them. It entertains them, or maybe all of those things. And this is not a new concept, by the way. So content marketing as a term and as a formal discipline has been around only for about 10 years. But the idea of content marketing has been around for a very long time. The Content Marketing Institute claims that way back in 1732, Poor Richard's Almanac was published as a way to promote Benjamin Franklin's printing business. Now, I always fact check the stats that I pull for stuff like this. I could not find any documentation to support the fact that the almanac was not originally printed as a moneymaker. But nonetheless, this is where the Content Marketing Institute claims that it all began. And I actually think, though, that an even more interesting and relevant example comes from a little more recently, although it's still over 100 years ago, and that's the Michelin Guide. Do we have any foodies in the room? People who love eating out? Yeah. So if you're not familiar with it, the Michelin Guide rates 30,000 establishments on 3 continents, and they're probably best known for their restaurant reviews. But even if you know all of that about Michelin, what in the world does fine dining have to do with tires, right? Because Michelin, maybe you didn't know, Michelin, the tire company, is responsible for these guides. So according to their website, they have a great website with a lot of history on it. The tire company was started in France in 1889 by the Michelin brothers. And at that time, there were fewer than 3,000 cars on the road in France. So not a big customer base. About 10 years later, they had an idea to help boost their sales. So they wanted to produce a guide for travelers. They wanted something that would help travelers feel comfortable driving their cars a long distance. So they came up with this guide that had maps, it had tips for changing tires on the road, and it had listings for lodging and restaurants around France. Okay? They figured that the more people wanted to visit faraway places, the more likely they would be interested in buying a car. And the more they drove those cars around France, the quicker their tires would wear out and would need to be replaced. And at that point, the Michelin name would be familiar and trusted because they'd had so many great adventures using the guides. They were communicating with their audience without selling. So in the 20s, Michelin recruited a team of mystery diners to anonymously review restaurants. That was the first time they actually had reviews instead of just listings. In 1926, they started awarding the finest restaurants with a single star. And then 5 years later, they introduced the 3-star system. And the rest is fine dining history, right? So, but think about going back to 1900, when they first introduced the guides, think about how bold and risky it must have been to not go the product marketing route, to not come up with a guide about how their tires were so much better than the competitors, or why you need to switch out your tires on a regular basis, right? For any other obvious product play. They sought to drive demand for their product in a more subtle way that would play out over time. They were patient, something a lot of us don't have today, patience. Okay, for a more modern example, let's look at Baby Center. I have 2 kids. And when I was pregnant the first time, I lived on Baby Center. Now, those of you who have had kids more recently probably know there's a lot of other sites out there like this. But at the time, Baby Center is still around. But in 2005, 2006, when I was pregnant for the first time, Baby Center was kind of the only game in town. So this site was great for me because it answered my many questions about my pregnancy. It had tons of resources about infant care. It had a great community section, it had crowdsourced product reviews, it had all this great information for me as a first-time mom that was making me feel really comfortable with this big change that was about to come into my life. They even sent a weekly newsletter that was customized to your stage of pregnancy, and I'll never forget, every week they compared the size of your baby to some kind of food item. So like in the beginning it was this microscopic thing, and then it was a grain of salt, and then it was a peppercorn and a popcorn kernel and a grape, and the next thing I know I'm carrying around a cantaloupe. So do you know who owns Baby Center? Johnson. Okay, you guys know this already. Johnson & Johnson. But you can't tell by looking at it, and you certainly can't tell it by reading their editorial content. They resisted the urge to rebrand the site when they bought it in 2001 to put themselves front and center. They stayed in the background. So they're communicating with their audience without selling. They're also making money off this, I'm sure, because the site is littered with ads. This one happens to be for Baby Center itself, but there were all kinds of other ads on the site, including for Johnson & Johnson products. But now it's basically turned into a media site. And you know what you will never see on Baby Center? You'll never see an article about the dangers of baby shampoo, or why Desitin is completely ineffective in curing diaper rash, right? Product marketing and content marketing, 2 sides of the same coin, right? Okay, so another example is LaFleur. So some of the women in the room may know that they make and sell business clothes for women, both online and in stores. And their blog is really lovely. It looks like an editorial magazine. It's called M-, which I love because I'm a total grammar nerd. I have an unholy love of M-. We can talk about M-, and N- and hyphens if you want to after this talk. So you'll see that some of the articles on this site are about clothes. We have, I don't know if you can see this one over here, we have 5 pieces, 8 outfits, a travel capsule wardrobe, how to create 8 travel-friendly outfits from only 5 garments. And then under most popular, 10 work dresses that will never need dry cleaning. So that's right in line with their product, right? Product-focused content. But look at the rest of the site. It's about women. It's audience-focused. It's about their customers, right? We have crowd sorceress Alex Daly on getting funded, burning out, and setting boundaries. Nothing about her clothes. And when you click into the article to read more about Alex, it's a very long article. Again, nothing about how she's dressed. All about her as a businesswoman and her life. However, littered among the editorial content are photos of Alex, and guess what? She's wearing MM LaFleur clothes, right? And then at the very bottom of the article, there's a section that says, shop Alex's looks. Okay, so that's really clever product placement and subtle. They're celebrating the work and her business and her life. And by the way, if you like the way she's dressed, here's a link where you can buy that jacket and her earrings. Okay? Now, I'm not an MM LaFleur customer. I was familiar with the brand, but I'd never been to their site, although now I kind of want to start reading it and shopping there. But do you know how I found out about them? It was from the New York Times, and it wasn't an ad. I get their daily briefing. It's an email newsletter every morning, and I usually skim through it on BART. At the very end of that daily briefing newsletter, there's a what we're reading section where their writers or editors suggest something else not on the New York Times that they've been reading that they recommend. And I want to read this because you could hardly write a better advertisement for your content than this. Jennifer Steinhauer, our editor of live journalism, which by the way sounds like a really fun job. I don't know what that is. She recommends this piece from an unusual site. MM LaFleur is a clothing website that offers busy women who have to do busy things perfect dresses that are often machine washable. The site also features more compelling profiles of women than do many journalism websites concerned with professional people, including this piece on the writer Gail Zamak-Laman. Her story of a strong mother who died young and a tough grandmother who inspired her to go for it all could easily have been reduced to tragedy, but instead it defines badassery, well-dressed to boot. Okay, I mean, this is editorial content in the New York Times about a business blog, right? You can't pay for something like this. And they even mention the clothes. They mention the clothes. So anyway, that's amazing. I love this example. So now we've seen several good examples of content marketing from B2C companies, but how many of you guys are in B2B? Okay, great. So by now you may be wondering if this even applies to you. You might be thinking, you know, I don't have the luxury of writing about babies and badass businesswomen. Although I could argue that anybody should write about badass businesswomen because they're probably in your audience, right? But nonetheless, there are plenty of great examples of B2B companies who are doing amazing things with content marketing, and we're going to look at a couple of those next. The first is Autodesk. And I'm starting with them because Autodesk was a pioneer in content marketing for B2B. So in 2012, they asked a guy named Dusty DiMercurio to focus on a new initiative for Autodesk that was going to be targeting their VSB business, or their VSB customers. So like any good marketer, Dusty started doing research on this audience, and right away he discovered that it was a really large and diverse audience, and that it was going to be super hard to target them because they represented such a vast array of industries. Okay. So in the course of his research on these small businesses, he did uncover some common needs and pain points that spanned across the various industries that these people were in. He discovered that their challenges had less to do with using an Autodesk software solution and more to do with the struggles of running a small business. And Dusty recognized right away that this was the opportunity for Autodesk. Not to push their products on the audience, not to tell them what they wanted to tell them, but to address the challenges that they were having and to tell them what they needed and wanted to hear. And that was information on how to make their small business succeed. So with that mission in mind, Dusty and his team launched an online magazine that was called Line, Shape, Space. And it's since been rebranded as Redshift. And they set out to write about trends in technology and design. It's a very simple and straightforward editorial mission. They told inspirational stories about their customers, but they spent minimal time talking about their use of Autodesk products, or no time in a lot of cases. These weren't case studies. They provided practical advice for people who run small businesses about how to succeed. And the site was very successful in drawing a huge audience. When Dusty was nominated for Content Marketer of the Year in 2016, he told the Content Marketing Institute that the Redshift site had 3 goals. First, attract an audience. Second, serve up highly relevant content. And third, send readers ultimately to teams at Autodesk who can nurture the relationship. Notice the word ultimately. that last one, they didn't start there. They didn't focus on conversion initially. First, they focused on the audience, building the audience. They were patient. They were communicating without selling. This is the 3-step process that our next example sought to emulate with its own site, and I know that because it's ours at Zendesk. So we have an editorial site called Relate, and I like to say that it's our love letter to the people and organizations that are focused on the customer experience, which is the space that we're in. So on Relate, we write about every aspect of the relationship between companies and their customers, and a little bit about work in general, because we all know that the internal work environment at a company does have a big impact on the way that your employees interact with your customers, right? What we don't write about on Relate is about Zendesk software and why it's cool and how to use it and why you should buy it. That's for the product section of Zendesk. And we do write a little bit about that in our blog and in our library as well. But it's not the goal for Relate. At Relate, we're aiming for a broader audience that expands beyond our customers and the people who are looking right now to learn more about Zendesk because they're considering buying something like what we offer. We want to attract people earlier than that. This is higher up in the marketing funnel, before they even know they need us, so that we're there and we're already trusted when they do, just like with the Michelin guides. We want to be there before they blow a tire. And so we built the Relate site for the audience first. And when they are ready to buy something ultimately, then we are there. We do have promos for Zendesk on the Relate site. So people can get over to Zendesk from there if they have a need. But the site wasn't designed that way. And in fact, our SVP of marketing, which was Bill's successor, when we were starting Relate, said he was envisioning Relate as a safe place for customer experience professionals to go where they don't have to worry about getting sold to. So that was his vision. So, but as I mentioned, we have subtle links over to Zendesk. So when people are ready, they have a way to get over to our site to learn more about our product. And even if there's parts of that audience on Relate that never buy Zendesk, that's okay too, because we have a purpose for them as well. Their purpose is to read our content and share it, right? We want them to post on social media. And inevitably, somebody in their network is one of our buyers, right? Or they mention us in a business meeting or at a cocktail party. And what's great about that is when we do reach our buyers that way, that recommendation for Relate or for Zendesk came from one of their trusted friends. It didn't come from us. So it automatically has more value. Another useful way to think about content marketing is the idea that content marketing supports the idea of your product category without outright selling your product. Okay? Now, I'm not dismissing the value of product-centric content or of outright sales content. That definitely has a really important place. It just tends to be a little lower in the marketing funnel. And my team works really closely with our product marketing team on generating that kind of content, because we do write about our product on our blog and in our resources. There is a part in the buyer's journey where what you want to tell people and what they want to hear is a perfect match. It's when they're shopping for you or they're looking for a solution like yours, right? So we want to be there when that happens. So we work in different ways with product marketing at the different stages of the funnel for whatever piece it is that we're targeting. And in the little dance there, that means that sometimes content marketing is taking the lead, okay, and our side of the coin is facing up. And then other times, product marketing is leading, and their side of the coin is facing up. But we always work together to create the right content for the audience at the stage of the funnel that we're targeting. So when customers are learning how to use new parts of our product or prospects are evaluating Zendesk, that's when we do want product marketing to take the lead. But content marketing is always there. We always work with them to make sure that even when it's a product-focused topic that we're focusing on our blog or our resources, we still want it to be a helpful resource and not just be a hard sell at Zendesk. We leave the hard sale for the product section of the website when people are really digging in and trying to get specific information about the product. The blog and the library on Zendesk are always audience-focused, even if the topic is our product. And that's reflected in our philosophy for our blog, which is we always want our readers to learn something useful, even if they don't currently use Zendesk, and they never will. They should still be able to take away something they can use. Okay, so let's switch gears here a little bit, because by now you might be thinking that this all sounds great, but even though we all want to have great content that inspires our audience and makes you proud, it makes sense from a brand perspective that this can be really expensive, right? I mean, I mentioned Coca-Cola and Marriott, that was probably a mistake. You don't have to have like a giant budget to succeed with content marketing, okay? And also, the other question you might be having is, what kind of return can you expect? Because it's okay to spend money if you know that you're going to get more than that back, right? If the ROI is there, then it's all right. The good news is that when done well, when you focus on quality, you do see a return on content marketing. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. It does, though, require patience, right? I know a lot of us are kind of tuned to looking for results, and we want things to happen tomorrow, or maybe we're patient enough to wait until next week. But content marketing, again, at the higher part of the funnel, is a longer term play. I always say it's a little bit like planting a garden instead of going to the grocery store, right? You're not going to get fruit tomorrow, but you are going to get a lot more fruit over time, okay? I also want to say that some of the examples I used were kind of separate editorial sites. You don't have to do that. You can do great content marketing right within the properties you already have. But if you do want to do a separate editorial brand, that also doesn't have to be really expensive. And I know that because I run the budget for Late and for our content marketing. It is a little bit of an initial investment, but on an ongoing basis, it is not expensive at all. I don't have, how many people actually do you guys think that we have working on a site like that, on our Relate site? Any guesses? Three full-time people? 5? Half a dozen? 0. I have 0 people working full-time on Relate. Okay? I have a pretty big team of writers, well, maybe like 6 writers full-time, and a lot of freelancers. None of them only work on Relate. Okay, they work on Zendesk too.
How much content do you guys put out like per day?
Per week on Relate, we do between 2 and 4, and similar to on the Zendesk blog.
Would
Yeah.
those be like full expensive pieces or like micro blogs?
No, they're like longer, usually between like 400 and 2,000 words, say. Yeah. We do have a lot of freelancers, so especially for Relate. I think it's really important on a site like Relate to have a lot of different voices. So we have freelancers that we use on a regular basis. We do use people on as a one-off. Some people will just write to us and want to contribute because they like the content so much. So I use a lot of freelancers, but nobody is devoted to it full-time. Even the editor of Relate also manages our customer marketing and does all the case studies and that sort of writing. Okay, so it is not an expensive endeavor. You can definitely do it. I also do spend some money on promotion, though. Not a ton, but I have a small budget that goes towards distribution, right? So like paid promotion of the content. So that was especially early in it was important in the early days of Relate when we were trying to establish our audience, just kind of getting it out in front of a lot of eyeballs to start building that momentum. But on an ongoing basis, it currently takes up, I think it's like a couple $1,000s a month. It's not that much, yeah.
Yeah, I love the idea of this.
Yeah.
I'm part of a small 12-person startup company right now, targeting our audience is people who are hard of hearing or deaf, so I think it's going to be really good for that.
Sure.
But as a 12-person startup, even that much money
Yeah.
is a big chunk, and I think it might be hard to convince my higher-ups.
Sure.
Is there a cheaper way to do it? More freelancing or something like that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I mentioned that we use freelancers. Some of them we pay, some of them we don't, because they're just passionate about the topic. So we found some influencers in customer experience and customer service who like write for their own blog. They have their own business, and so they are also trying to draw attention to themselves. So they were willing to write for free. So you can do that. And also, I mean, internal resources, right? You don't have to have a full-time writer on staff to have a blog or to write great content. You just need someone who's willing to do it. You might need someone who's a great editor on staff then to take some of that content that's written by non-professional writers. Because quality is really important, and we're going to talk about that in a minute too. Like investing in quality, I would rather you do 2 really good blog posts a month than do 7 really shitty ones and 1 mediocre one. Like the 2 good ones a month is going to get you a better return.
Right.
So yeah.
Thanks.
Can I, let me, if you guys don't mind, let me finish this. I'm almost there. Let me just do a couple more, and I promise we're going to have like 15 minutes for questions. Is that cool? Okay. I might answer some of your questions on what's coming up. So, okay. So going back to Relate and to our goals for that site, and this will answer any questions that some of you may have about measurement in particular. So the 3-step process that we borrowed for Relate from Autodesk, I want to talk about how we approach that and how we measure it. So the results there. So in the early days of Relate, as I mentioned, we focused solely on building an audience. That was our number one goal. And the SVP who I mentioned, he also was totally on board with that. And he's like, I'm only going to measure you on growth in monthly unique visitors. That's the only thing I care about right now. That wasn't the ultimate goal. But in the beginning, that was our single point of measurement. Because the goal, again, was to build a massive audience around this broad topic of customer experience and professional relationships. And that's what we did. We started Relate a little over about 2.5 years ago now. And we are up to over 50,000 monthly unique visitors on Relate on a pretty regular basis. Sometimes we're over 60. And that's pretty close to the amount of traffic we get on our blog. At the same time, we did not cannibalize any of our blog traffic, which people were worried about. So both the blog and Relate have continued to climb an audience size-wise. The sites have a different focus and a different audience, and there is a lot of overlap, to be sure. But people did not mass abandon our blog, or even a little bit abandon our blog to go over to Relate. So that was very important. The next step was to serve up highly relevant content, which we've been doing. When we first started, we were really broadly focused just on business relationships in general, because we wanted to attract that mass audience. Lately, we've been focusing in a little bit more on customer experience in particular, and still writing a little bit about business relationships, but mostly about customer experience. And having an editorial mission is really important. Redshift also had that. And it's okay if that mission evolves over time, because you're going to learn about your audience and your goals might shift. So it's okay to evolve it, but always have a defined, like write it down editorial mission so that everyone can agree to it. And then the final step is where we are now. So we've spent a lot of time building out this audience and earning their trust. And now we have this, massive audience. We also have a large database of people who've subscribed to our monthly newsletter. And we recently surveyed the audience so we could get to know more about them and make sure we were hitting the right people. And we learned 2 really important things. And that is, this is not just an audience of Zendesk superfans. We have over 100,000 customers and over 1 million agents at Zendesk that use the product. But it is not just those people. Half of the people, when we ran an analysis of all the email addresses in our database, less than half of them were in our SFA system. So that means, think about that. That means half of these people have never interacted with us from a business perspective. So that is a huge opportunity for us. They already know us, they like our content, they raised their hand to join our database, right? The second thing that we learned that was interesting was that this same audience, half of which don't know who we are, they told us they want to learn more about Zendesk. So we asked them, we had a list of topics that we were thinking about writing about more about on Relate. And information about Zendesk was one of the things they most frequently checked. So we were patient and we earned their trust over time. We focused on their needs and helping them rather than selling to them. And now that courtship has worked, and they're saying, hey, I'd like to get to know you a little bit better. If we'd been hard selling Zendesk all along, we probably wouldn't have built that massive audience in the first place, right? And by the way, if you're wondering about that greenfield audience and who those people are those really their buyers? Maybe it's just like college students or something. It's not, because we asked about that too. Whoops. Uh-oh. We asked who they were. So they are professionals. They are in customer-facing positions. They have buying authority. They're managers, executives, that kind of thing. So they are our buyers. Okay, hold on a second. Sorry. Okay. So that's my anecdotal success story about Relate and how content marketing does actually impact your business. But I do want to give you a couple of numbers as well, because I know those can be just as, if not more, influential in convincing people that this is something that we should invest in. Okay, so first of all, data to support the fact that customers do not want a straight sales pitch, at least not all the time. And by the way, it's never a good idea to try to let's wrap a sales pitch in something else and try to fool people into buying our product. That never goes well. People can sniff out a thinly veiled sales pitch. So that just never goes well. Don't try it. And in fact, 71% of executives said that content that seems like a sales pitch leaves a bad impression. So that harms your brand. Okay? At the same time, it's not that people don't want to hear from your brand, even about topics that aren't about your product or your service. 84% of people today expect brands to create content that entertains, that tells stories, and that provides solutions. Okay? At the same time, they say that 60% of content from brands is poor, irrelevant, or fails to deliver. Okay, guys, the bar is really low for brand content, okay? You don't have to do crazy things. You just have to focus on producing quality content, and you're gonna meet and probably exceed most expectations, and you're gonna look better than a lot of the content out there. Okay, focus on quality. You'll automatically stand out. Okay. So data supporting that content is fuel for the customer journey. It helps people move along to that point of purchase. Forrester says that the average number of pieces read by consumers before making a purchasing decision is 11.4. I have to think that's for B2B because I don't read 11 articles before I buy a pair of earrings online, right? So, but nonetheless, I think we all can agree, we've probably seen it in our own behavior, that people do a lot of research now, right? When they first have an idea that they might have a problem they're looking to solve, they start searching on that. And then later, maybe they've identified a product category that can help them solve that, and they start searching on that. So they're moving down the funnel with Google, increasingly specific Google searches, right? So it's really important that you're creating content for all of those stages of the thought process, and that you're appearing in those organic search results, right? And the reason you have to appear in the organic search results, you can't buy your way out of this problem with Google Ads. And that's because of what is revealed here in the other stat, and that is that 72% of searchers in an eye tracking study ignored the ads in Google, right? We all have ad blindness, right? Does anyone even really, I mean, we look at them a little bit, but most of us don't even pay attention to the ads, right? Yet 100% of the people in the study saw the organic results, so that's where you have to be. That's the money spot, and it's free. But you do, again, have to invest in quality content in order to get those really important Google rankings near the top. Right. And then finally, content converts. We've definitely seen this. This is really hard to track. I mean, content marketing is a lot higher in the funnel. If you heard Bill talk, he talked a lot about first touch and last touch attribution. A lot of the content journey is the stuff in the middle that doesn't get a lot of credit, and it's really fuzzy and hard to track. But as we saw, people can, they look at 11 pieces on average, right? So you know that your content can help push people down that path. And again, we've seen that. We track things. We do have multi-touch attribution at Zendesk, and we've seen how important various types of content, everything from like just funny videos like the ones you guys saw that Bill showed, and like sales data sheets. Both of those things are equally influential in attracting people who are going to buy and in nurturing them through the journey. So you really do need it all. 74% of marketers said that content marketing has helped increase their lead quality and quantity. So if you want to increase lead quality and quantity, content marketing is something that can help with that. Oops. Okay, so before we take questions, I want to conclude by inviting you to join the cult of content. No, I'm just kidding. You're not joining the cult of content. Please, in fact, do not be that person who goes into a meeting and says, let's do a viral video. Like, no, just no, okay? Nothing good ever came of that. So what I want to do instead is just leave you with a couple more tips on how to nurture a culture of content at your organization. So whether you're the CEO or another executive, whether you're in marketing or just a friend of marketing, you can help set your company up for success with content by being a good partner in a few ways, okay? And those are, first of all, be patient. You heard me use that word a lot today, right? Content marketing doesn't deliver results overnight. Okay, you have to be willing to earn your audience's attention and trust, and it does take time. But the good news is when you work hard and you put in the work to earn it over time, it's more enduring. It lasts. They're more likely to trust you. They're more likely to stick with you when you mess up. Number 2 is trust your team. Teach your team to fish and then get out of the way. Resist the urge to line edit every blog post if you're an improver. Okay, we're not putting a billboard in Times Square. We're writing for the internet. You can change it if they mess up. Okay, and I want to tell you a funny story about that. When I first started at Zendesk, and after a few weeks, I was starting to edit and publish on the blog. Mikkel Svein, our CEO, I would hit publish on the blog. I would look at my watch, and within 1 or 2 hours, I would get an email from Mikkel that said, Monica, can you come into my office? And I would like do the walk of shame across the floor over to Mikkel's office. And then I would sit down and I would be subjected to all the ways that we had failed with that blog post. He hated the headline. He didn't like the first paragraph. He thought the anecdote was terrible. You know, our point of view was bad on that topic. We shouldn't be writing about this topic at all. Like, it was always something. And so I would spend a lot of time with him, like asking questions about where we'd fallen short and why, and tell me how you would do it differently. Sometimes I didn't agree with him, and then we'd have a nice little debate/fight about it. But I always got to, again, like ask questions and figure it out, and like kind of, he did a great job of teaching me to fish. Like, he was training me to do better, not by just taking it back and doing it himself. And in fact, at one point I asked, Mikkel, do you just want to save us a lot of time? Do you just want to start reviewing these before I publish them? And he looked at me like, no, I don't want to do that. I want you to get it right. Like, I'm going to keep doing this until I feel like you get it. And I really am grateful for the time that he spent doing that, because it started to taper off. And I don't think I've been called into his office for maybe a year now, so it's been a while. But yeah, so I got to like in his head maybe a little more than I wanted to, but really got to understand like his vision for the company and his story and our point of view, and it helped me. I appreciated him not just taking the reins back, basically. So I would encourage you to do the same. It does take time. Like, I'm sure he didn't love having to have me come into his office for 15 minutes a day for like 3 weeks in a row, and he has a lot more important things to do than worry about our blog. But that investment in me paid off over time for him, right? Third, be brave. You have to accept risk and expect failure. And don't punish your team when they do something that everyone thinks is going to be the next viral video and it doesn't go viral, right? Risk reward. I think you all know this. You're entrepreneurs. And then finally, encourage quality, not quantity. You asked about publishing schedules. There is kind of a minimum viable amount that you have to do in order to, you know, keep things fresh, to have Google look at you with a positive eye. And it is about once a week, people say. But like I said, quality always trumps quantity. So if you can only pull together a couple of great blog posts a month, that is fine. Resist the urge to do a bunch of crap more frequently, okay? Because that is not going to get you the same results as really quality work, okay? I almost never report on quantity. Like, I don't go into our QBRs and say, oh, we did 45 blog posts and 18 related articles. Like, we don't do that. And no one measures me on how much output we're doing. They measure me on results. They want to know how many leads were generated, how many leads were touched by content, how much pipeline, how much revenue. Those are more important numbers, right? Who cares how many blog posts we did, as long as they're performing, okay? All right, and with that, I want to thank you for not joining the cult of content. And instead for returning to your company and nurturing a culture of content and supporting all the writers and storytellers in your organization. So thank you, and I'll take questions. Okay, wow. Okay, we'll start here in the blue shirt. So the question was about the tools that we're using to track effectiveness of content and campaigns. So we use a variety. We, of course, use things like Google Analytics to track consumption metrics like traffic and that sort of thing, where traffic is coming from. We have a multi-touch attribution system. Were you in Bill's session before? Were you talking about that a little bit? Okay. Multi-touch attribution does a great job, although it's really complicated, of tracking every touch across the journey, right? So, of which, again, content is often that part in the middle that doesn't get the first or the last touch attribution, where most of the credit goes to typically. Our multi-touch attribution system, Bill mentioned when he was at Zendesk, we used Convertro, and now we use Visible. That is not for the faint of heart, though, I will say. Multi-touch attribution is really hard, and it's very expensive. Like, we have a whole huge team of data analysts that have taken about 9 months to get that implemented, just FYI. Now, that said, there are kind of light multi-touch attribution built into other solutions. So you can just kind of ask about that as you're looking at other marketing automation systems. They're not quite as robust or as good as the dedicated standalone ones, but they're also not nearly as expensive or hard to maintain. And then we have things like Eloqua and Salesforce and that sort of stuff for measuring leads and pipeline and all of that. Does that answer? Yeah. Okay. Okay, right behind you.
So, what are some of the key, like from a bear skeleton standpoint, what would be the key pieces on that you would want to see on a content marketing team?
From a bear scale, you said?
What?
From what?
Like from a bear.
Like the bare
scale,
minimum?
Yeah, like
Yeah.
obviously we're all in startups, so
Yeah.
we're not necessarily going to have the budget to go out and get a 10-person headcount.
I get it.
What are the bare pieces you need?
I say start with a blog. Start with a blog and start with social media. Right, those are the two most important things. That's where content marketing began, right? Remember the beginning of my story? That was kind of where it all started. So blogging is really easy to do. And if you go to the Zendesk blog and you look back to like 2011, 2012 before I joined, like most of the blog posts were written by Mikkel, by our CEO. They're not very good. He's a good communicator and a brilliant man, but he's not only is he not a great, I mean, he's a decent writer, but he's also not a native English speaker. But nonetheless, like you can see the passion and the energy and the excitement for the space that he had, and that's fine. Like you don't have to be an incredible writer. You don't have to be a great content marketer. As long as you have passion and energy and excitement and enthusiasm, and that comes through, that's okay. So you can leverage, like inevitably in every startup or every company, there's somebody who likes writing, like who's kind of passionate about it and is good at it. If you're lucky, it's the same person. Sometimes people are passionate about writing, but they're terrible, and that's a problem. But nonetheless, you can usually, I mean, I would recommend blogging. Blogging is a great place to start. It's really low investment. It's super easy. Think carefully about the topics you write about. Like again, resist the urge to like write every day just about rambling things that don't really matter. Like talk to, if you have, maybe talk to someone who knows something about SEO and just kind of figure out like some topics. Talk to your customers, talk to your sales team or your customer service people, and figure out like what customers ask about that aren't about your product, and then start writing about those topics. Like those are great things to start talking about. And you can just do some Google searches, get some information, write a few blog posts, and you're on your way.
So realistically, one person though.
You mean like hiring a person?
Yeah, I meant like headcount wise.
Oh, I see. Yeah, no, I think one person is fine. Like you can hire a content marketing manager, and that person should be able to do blogging. They should be able to do, a lot of them can do social media as well. And those are really closely tied. I manage both teams, and we find that to be really effective because they're kind of our biggest megaphone in spreading the word about our content. But yeah, no, I think headcount wise, you could hire a content marketing manager who you can reasonably expect to do all the research, all the writing. Maybe they ghostwrite for some people in the company as well, so it's not just one name or one voice on the blog. But then also do social media, and then any other kinds of content you want to produce. Like if you do decide to do a video, not because someone said it in a meeting, but because you decide that's an effective way to reach your audience, then they can write the script, and they can do all kinds of other content as well. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to start going this way. So we'll start with you, back there. I want to repeat that real fast just for the recording. Answer the Public is a great site for finding topics to write about. Yes, go ahead. So the question is, when is the point where you make a decision about moving like content that you're putting on your own blog and going to third-party sites where maybe it's more trusted and people will...
Or creating your own third-party site, right?
Oh, you mean like an editorial brand.
That's makeup.com.
Got it.
So like,
yeah.
I have my non-branded.com, not third-party,
right.
Like I own it and run it, but it's not... Like
right, like Relate and like Redshift, yeah. Okay, so I think the decision to do that, it depends on a couple of things. Number one, while it doesn't take a lot of money or invested necessarily to maintain it on an ongoing basis, it does take a lot of money to get it started, to set it up. So you have to be willing to like make that investment. If you have, if you think that you're going to have like a short period of time where you're going to have a lot of budget and resources where you can devote to something like that, that would be a good time to get something like that started, so you have the foundation to do it moving forward. And another way to answer that question is, I think any time you're having trouble reaching your audience on your own property because you're a vendor and people don't trust that content from vendors a lot of times, that's an opportunity to then move it to a third-party site where you're not hiding the fact, like we don't hide the fact that Relate is owned by Zendesk, but somehow people are we don't have as high of a bounce rate on Relate because people, when they come to Zendesk, if they're looking for something high level, and some people might see that it's a software site and just be like, I don't care what a software company has to say. I want to know about customer service. I'm not a software buyer, right? So if you're at the point where you want to just capture more attention and eyeballs, that's when you think about moving to a third-party site. So, but again, it does require some upfront investment in resources and money-wise. Like you have to get someone to build the site, you have to get designers, like it's a lot. Now it's kind of self-sustaining on our side, but like you do have to have kind of that initial shot of resources in order to get it up and running. Yeah. Okay, yes.
Have you learned any best practices with like creating content calendars? First part of my question, and what do you feel like is the future of content marketing?
Ooh. Okay, so the first question was, the easy question, was about content calendars. Best practices for content calendars. Do you mean like technology-wise or just?
Just more so with like the different channels, and having a consistent voice across all your different channels.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a good idea to have like a single point of truth for all the content that you're producing, so you can keep all of, like if you have a blog and you also have something like Relate, like we do. We have a lot of international sites. We're a bit bigger than probably a lot of you guys. But like social media campaigns, other kinds of things. So having all of that together, so to your point, you can kind of coordinate everything and make sure that everyone is writing about the same topic at the same time is definitely important. There are a lot of technologies that can help with that, and some of them are not very expensive. There are things like DiviHQ and Marketing AI, which rebranded themselves. I mean, you can even honestly use like a Google Calendar or spreadsheet to manage that stuff. But just kind of requiring everybody to track all of those things in one place kind of gets everybody on the same page. I mean, that's the easiest way, is just like put it all together so you can literally look at it in one spot. And then the future of content marketing, I mean, I think video, I think there's a lot of opportunity in video. When I say video, I don't mean expensive, produced, like spend tens of thousands of dollars. I mean like social video. Facebook, we're doing a lot more experimentation with things like Facebook Live and things that are a little more, less polished, right? I think people, first of all, the algorithms favor that kind of content. So it's a lot easier to get seen on like Facebook, for example, if you're doing video and live video in particular. So, I think there's a lot of uncharted territory in video, and like YouTube has been like super popular for years, and it does not show any sign of abating. Like that, people spend it blows my mind, frankly. People spend so much time on YouTube. So I think experimenting with video, and again, don't think you have to have like hire a whole production crew and have an expensive camera. Just like do something that's on brand, but that's low fidelity, and that will take you a long way. Okay, yes, in the blue. Oh my gosh, that is actually above my pay grade, frankly. I have no idea what product marketing's budget is at Zendesk. I know, content marketing, again, can be, our budget has varied so wildly over the 5 years that I've been there. It honestly hasn't grown that much. I tend to invest more in hiring writers than in like spending program dollars on other kinds of content, because I'm super passionate, in case you didn't notice, about quality, right? So I hire people who are former journalists, who have some business experience, and like bringing all of that in-house has been really important to me. The other things we spend money on is like some paid promotion, although I'm fortunate also is that our advertising team handles most of the paid promotion, even for content, so they take care of a lot of that for us. So, I mean, honestly, if you have people in-house who are passionate about writers, or if you can tap into a community of influencers who are passionate about writing and are willing to contribute to your properties, you don't have to spend a ton of money on content marketing. It doesn't have to be expensive. Yeah.
Unfortunately, I believe we only have time for one more question.
Oh, okay. Well, you've had your hand up for a while. Sorry. To repeat the question for the recording, you're asking if the idea of brands being a media company and doing all these different kinds of media activities, does that resonate with us? Yes, I think so. And that is part of like the whole cult of content. Is that, like, you heard the word brand journalism all the time. Has anyone heard that? That drove me a little crazy, frankly, because that's an oxymoron, right? I mean, like, you can't be a brand and be a journalist. Like, they're completely antithetical. But at the same time, people have come to accept the fact, as we saw in that stat, that brands can give them good quality content. Unfortunately, most of them don't, right? 60% of people said the content that brands are delivering is crap, but 86% of them said they expect brands to do it, right? So I think that during that whole period where content marketing was becoming such a big thing, a lot of companies invested in creating a media property for content marketing for their, for that audience. And I think that totally resonates. I mean, we kind of felt that way about Relate. I call it an online magazine, Like that is what it is. I will never say that like it's a journalistic endeavor because it's not. I mean, we do have a point of view. We would never talk trash about customer service on that site, right? But yeah, I mean, I think that not only does that resonate with me, I think it also really inspires the people who work on it as well. One of the things I neglected to mention was that, the fact that my writers write about Zendesk, but they also write about Relate, and same with the designers who work on the site. They love Relate. Like, can you imagine? It like scratches this creative itch for them. So there's this huge internal benefit to allowing people to write about things that isn't like, here's how to use our software, which is really important, and they get that. But when they get to write about these other like cool things, and they're former journalists and writers, like they get super jazzed about it. So there's this kind of internal halo effect of working on Relate that really helps with employee morale as well. So I mean, I think for a lot of reasons, thinking about it as a media company does have a lot of benefit, as long as you don't fool yourself into thinking that you're actually the New York Times, because you're not. Right? Yeah. Okay, I'm happy to answer any other questions at the end if anyone wants to come up. But thank you, really appreciate it.